Hi guys, how are you? How's everything going? Welcome to my Wednesday live, but now I've been doing it on Thursdays. Thursdays at 1 p.m. How is everyone doing? So today, sorry, I'm just opening something up. I'm just opening the page up just to make sure it's all working all right. And so I can see questions if any of you have any questions. I should have done this before. So today I'm going to be talking about insulin, and the reason I wanted to talk about insulin is because recently I've been talking about a lot of hormone issues when it comes to PMS, PMDD, mood swings, problems in your cycle, and insulin has a huge factor in your cycle when it comes to hormone kind of synthesis, hormone metabolism. And so what we tend to find is elevated insulin, hyperinsulinemia, can lead to hormone imbalance. It can lead to elevated testosterone, it can lead to elevated cortisol, it can lead to low progesterone and elevated allopregnanolone, which can lead to PMDD. So it's really important, not just for our general health and metabolic health and functional and diseases such as diabetes, it's important for our hormones that we're not running through life with hyperinsulinemia. And obviously one of the biggest things we look at is diet. Diet is a huge factor in insulin levels, blood sugar levels. But I also today want to touch on the fact that toxins have a huge influence when it comes to our insulin levels. So we could be having the healthiest diet in the world, but we still have problems with polycystic ovarian syndrome, or we're still having problems with belly weight, or we're still having problems with elevated testosterone and acne, and we've got this healthy diet. If we are exposed to toxins, what that essentially does to our body is it will initiate this stress response, and it is the stress response that can initiate the insulin and cause what's called hyperinsulinemia, so causing polycystic ovarian syndrome, PMDD, lower your progesterone, elevate your estrogen, and then cause insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is a big one here. Insulin resistance is where your insulin rises, but your body is unable to use the insulin, and this leads to high blood sugar, it leads to more insulin in your body, and it leads to hyperinsulinemia. And this is what drives that insulin resistance. And what toxins do, toxins actually stimulate this stress response. So when you're exposed to toxins, and one of the things I do find, particularly with women that say work at the perfume counter in David Jones, is they have one of the most common issues they have with hormones is what's called polycystic ovarian syndrome. And polycystic ovarian syndrome is a syndrome which can cause that elevated insulin. And so this exposure to the perfumes, this exposure to the toxins, it's not only driving liver inflammation, it's driving detoxification issues, it's driving your stress response up, which is then driving your insulin levels up. And so this will happen when you're exposed to other toxins as well, including heavy metals, including BPA. Insulin resistance can lead to other conditions over time, not just hormonal conditions, but it can lead to diabetes. And we do know that diabetes is a hormonal condition because it is a stress-related condition. So normally with diabetics have that elevated cortisol level as well. And so we know a trauma, high stress environment, high stress work can also lead to issues with blood sugar problems and sort of preempt you for that diabetic constitution. There's been some studies done which is quite interesting. There have been some studies done, and I know that I've done a lot of hair mineral analysis tests. I don't know if you've ever had a hair mineral analysis test. They're really interesting and they're quite enlightening and can give you a really good overview of what's happening in your body in terms of minerals, but also toxic heavy metals. Some of the metals that get tested in the hair, we've got iron and copper, but we also have things like cadmium, nickel, arsenic, mercury. So it's really helpful to do. They're about $120 to $160 depending on where you get it and which one you get. But it can be really enlightening to not only see what your minerals are doing, like your calcium, your magnesium, your iron, but to see if there is any storage in your body of these heavy metals. So I myself, I have a storage of nickel. And the reason I have a storage of nickel is because when I was about 8 years old, in the playground, a boy called Rory tripped me over. And I smashed these two front teeth here. So since 8, I've always had some resin. So I've still got the teeth intact, but they're chipped like halfway. So about every 3 or 4 years, I have to get these redone here because they start to yellow a little bit, redone, and the resin is put in. And the fillers, some of the fillers were containing BPA, but the fillers contain nickel. And so when I did my hair mineral analysis test, I actually had high nickel, which was quite interesting. And that's just from this tooth here. Obviously going into my bloodstream, it's in my saliva, goes into the bloodstream here, and my body's building it up. So just using things like silica will help me detoxify that. Greens powder will help. But who knows what other symptoms this is causing. But there have been some studies showing that when people have higher cadmium, higher arsenic, even higher nickel, they're more at risk of diabetes, which is a blood sugar condition. There have been some studies done showing that BPA, bisphenol A, can sit on the receptor sites, the insulin receptor sites. So BPA is from plastics. BPA is from polymer resins. It's from plastic bottles, and you can get BPA free, but the issue with BPA free is pretty much the same as BPA. It's not BPA, it's BPS, and it's BPA free. So whenever plastic says BPA free, it's pretty much got the same thing, and it's going to be causing the same problems. There just haven't been enough studies done. But BPA sits on the receptor site of insulin, and what this means is it drives insulin up in the body, so it can cause hyperinsulinemia. One of the good things about BPA is you can detox it quite quickly. So if you have a completely BPA free sort of lifestyle in terms of your water, in terms of your plastics, in terms of all of that kind of thing, you can detox BPA quite quickly from your body, and so that will support, and then you work on the insulin levels. But yeah, BPA sits on the receptor site, so the insulin can't sit on the receptor site, and then that will drive the insulin up, and that can lead to then hyperinsulinemia, which can drive other conditions. Hyperinsulinemia can lead to adrenal issues. It can lead to polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, elevated testosterone. So it can be a number of different things, but it's just good to recognize that, but also know that you can detox BPA pretty quickly. Another thing that happens when you're exposed to toxins is it does drive up what's called cytokines in your body. These are an inflammation protein, and they rise in your body. So this protein that causes this inflammation can cause all sorts. It could cause, for some people, it might cause skin issues, rosacea. For some people, it might cause sort of achy, painful joints. Others, it could cause keratosis pilaris. Others, it could cause IBS kind of symptoms. So the symptoms for each different person might be different, but this exposure to these toxins, they rise this cytokine, this pro-inflammatory cytokine, and the higher this gets, it can lead to metabolic diseases. This is why we find that a lot of people, particularly men who have maybe had a stressful lifestyle, stressful work, maybe drinking a lot, or even men that do a lot of exercise plus they drink and their diet's not that great, it can lead to insulin resistance and diabetes in later life. So never discount the stress and then the toxin exposure when it comes to diabetes. Just working on your diet is not enough. Let's look at cortisol for a moment, because I want to touch on cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. And when cortisol rises, or you've got elevated cortisol, so low cortisol versus elevated cortisol, low cortisol, fatigue, depression, lethargy, maybe low blood pressure, maybe feeling cold, that kind of thing. High cortisol, wired, maybe hyper alert, maybe hyper vigilant, maybe not being able to sleep, maybe running around. You're energetic for a while, then you crash. Energetic for a while, then you crash. Low cortisol is more fatigue. With the high cortisol, what the cortisol does, and this is why high cortisol can lead to a lot of weight gain. High cortisol causes what's called gluconeogenesis. So high cortisol can be high due to our lifestyle, but also it can be high due to toxins. So if we're exposed to toxins, whether that's mold, whether that's heavy metals, whether that's BPA, whether that's cleaning products, if we're a cleaner or if we work in an industry or factory where there's lots of toxins, that will spike our cortisol levels. And then what elevated cortisol does is that leads to what's called gluconeogenesis. And gluconeogenesis is when other food products like proteins are converted into glucose. So normally we eat starch or sugars. So we eat pure glucose in fruits or sweets, that kind of thing. Or we have starch in sweet potatoes, pumpkin, vegetables, rice, quinoa, legumes, and these are converted into glucose in our body, and then that glucose is either stored as fat, used as energy, stored in our liver, or used energy at the time. But sometimes we can be having not much glucose but gaining weight, and we're eating lots of protein, and that protein, due to the high stress levels, can be converted into glucose. So this is something to look out for. If you know you're exposed to lots of toxins and you're on a paleo diet, for example, a low starch diet or a keto diet, and you're still gaining weight or you're not feeling great, it could be something to do with your cortisol level. So it's really important to check in with that, and working on your toxin levels and detoxing and cleansing is an important part of the process. That's why it's an important part of the process to balancing your hormones, and also recognizing any toxic exposure that you have. So for example, if it's if you get your hair mineral test done and you've got high mercury, you know, where has the high mercury come from? Has it come from eating tuna? Has it come from fillings? Has it come from eating other fish? Is it historic? Was your mum high in mercury and that's just sort of led on to you? Are you being exposed acutely to it, or is it more a storage? So you need to work these things out. It's really important, particularly with heavy metals like mercury. As well as it causing an issue with insulin in your body, it's not great for the brain as well, and it can cause some degeneration of brain cells. So it's really important. Balancing copper and iron and zinc is really important, and making sure you've got those nicely balanced. If you have too much copper due to the oral contraception pill, or endometriosis, elevated estrogen, or maybe having elevated candida, can lead to copper storage. This will also induce a stress response. So you might be more likely to have elevated insulin in your body when you've got elevated copper. And so then you've now got this cycle of the candida, copper, estrogen, but also insulin. And then this is what leads to endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome. So just being aware of that and being aware of your copper levels. You want copper, but you don't want it too high to overtake zinc, and you don't want it too low either. So when we're looking at our hormones, we're looking at removing those toxic loads so that we can bring our estrogen insulin levels down. So being aware of your environment, being aware of mold, being aware of your cleaning products, your beauty products, all of that kind of thing. Getting rid of those to start, particularly if you know you've got hormonal issues like endometriosis or polycystic ovarian, fibroids, all of those kind of things. If you suffer from these hormone imbalances, it's really important that you support yourself by removing toxins from your environment and just ensuring good drinking water, and just ensuring you're not, having too much tuna. Tuna really, it does have a lot of mercury in. So definitely once a week, even less, but definitely no more than once a week with tuna. I want to touch on glycation as well. Glycation is where, sorry, I'm getting a bit of a sore throat. Glycation is where there's an issue with the sugars in your body, and it's normally caused by things like vegetable oils, you know, cooking, and this can disrupt the proteins in the food, but sugar can also cause it in the body. So foods that are sort of highly heated, smoked foods, dried meats, really overcooked meats can cause what's called glycation, and it kind of makes the protein sticky, and this is what can cause aging, and it can cause metabolic disease, and it can cause a lot of inflammation. But having a high sugar consumption, particularly high fructose, can also lead to this as well, and this can also lead to issues with hormone imbalance and with insulin and with elevated estrogen, elevated testosterone, elevated cortisol. So this is one of the reasons we talk about not eating, you know, really overcooked food, not too many smoked foods, not too many heated foods, not too many foods that have been oxidized, and just being careful with the fats that you cook with. I mean, this is one of the reasons that we suggest not using canola oil or sunflower oil to cook, you know, using your stable fats to cook, because when you get these advanced glycation end products, which are the AGEs, they can lead to a lot of inflammation. They can lead to the high insulin in the body, but also they can oxidize your lipids, so they can oxidize your fats. So it's not good for cholesterol. So one of the things about cholesterol is if you've got high cholesterol, that might be fine. You might be fine with elevated cholesterol. What we actually want to look at when it comes to cholesterol is we want to go a little bit deeper, and we want to look at the quality of your cholesterol. So it's not about having high or low cholesterol. It's about, is the cholesterol nice and soft and fluffy like a cloud? If you've got high insulin, if you have a lot of these advanced glycation end products, which are caused by high sugar diet, lots of bad oils, the cooking methods, the types of meats you eat, that can lead to more advanced glycation end products, which can lead to more disruption of the lipids, which can lead to these kind of sharp cholesterol molecules which do damage. But that is caused definitely by the high insulin. So when we're looking at triglycerides in our body, when we're looking at our fats in our body, insulin as well is a big component of regulating our fats in our body and making sure our fats are healthy rather than being unhealthy. So don't necessarily look at the levels, look at the health. And there are tests where you can look at your cholesterol more, particularly if you have high cholesterol and you're being badgered by your medical your GP, to go on statins. Ask to have this further test done, because that will give you some peace of mind as to whether your cholesterol is high but actually in a really healthy place, or we can have low cholesterol and the cholesterol is still in a bad place. So you could have low cholesterol but it's really unhealthy cholesterol, and that's not good. We want a good level of cholesterol in our body, and we want it to be kind of soft and healthy and in good condition. With that in mind, with the glycation, spirulina is actually good to support that, and also polyphenols, so your green tea and your berries, is very good to support that kind of oxidation in the body. So when it comes to these sugars, when it comes to that high insulin, and when it comes to the toxins, the first thing you want to do is you want to find your exposure. Where is your exposure to toxins, and reduce those toxins from your body. The next thing you want to do is you want to work on bringing down your insulin. We don't want it too low. You don't want it like under 3, but you don't want it right at the end, because if you've got hyperinsulinemia, that's when you're going to get the hormone imbalances. So first of all, identify your toxic load. Heavy metal mineral test is fantastic to do for this, so I would highly recommend doing those. Once you know any exposure that you've got, reduce that exposure. So obviously clean up the toxins in the house, make sure there's no mold exposure, make sure you haven't got any exposure that's kind of even in your body. So like I said, I've got the nickel exposure here because I've got a resin in here where I chipped my tooth. If you've got mercury fillings, you might want to get them removed. If you find out you've got high copper, that could be from the oral contraceptive pill, that could be from the coil. So there are lots of places that you can get this exposure. Aluminium can come from too much rice. No, arsenic can come from too much rice. Aluminium could come from using lots of cans or canned drinks. BPA can come from the liner, and say even coconut water, the liner, you know, and then we've got food. So work out your exposure first, then work out what heavy metals or toxins there is exposure to, and then start to detoxify. So working on your liver and your gallbladder to bring these heavy metals out, working on your mitochondria to bring them out very, very slowly. And talking about that, that's a whole different topic in terms of bringing them out, but this is really what you want to do. But starting with spirulina, starting with polyphenols, reducing your exposure, and of course limiting your sugars will start to rebalance those insulin levels and start to bring the toxins out. And then if you want to make a start of any toxins in your body, obviously the lymphatic system is one of the first places to start. So dry skin brushing, castor oil packs, lymphatic massage, nettle tea, dandelion tea, all of those things are beautiful lymphatic cleansers. But remember, with the lymphatic system, it's manual. You want to be manual. So jumping up and down, using a trampoline, and the massage is one of the best way to kind of relieve that lymphatic system. So I hope that helped in terms of the connection between insulin, heavy metals, and your hormones. But now hopefully you can see it makes sense with some of these women that are exposed to toxins, you know, why it might cause elevated cortisol, why it might cause elevated estrogen and testosterone, and then what you can do about it. Because I know some women get super frustrated, they're doing all the right things, but just something is off, there's something going on. So this can definitely be one of the things. So if you've got any questions, please pop them below. I'm starting to lose my voice now. So have a fantastic day, and I will see you next week. Bye.